In this video, we're going to go over how to complete discussion board number 6 in Math 203. So when you go to the directions for discussion board number 6, it's going to have a file attached, and that file is going to open up in Excel. And it's going to be a number of speeds from different cell phone carriers that were measured at different airports. So this video is about how to complete these steps in Statcrunch. So the easiest way to move this data into Statcrunch is just to click on the top corner here to highlight the whole page and go ahead and copy that page, and then go over to your Statcrunch and go ahead and click here and paste. So now we have the airport code, so this is the labeling for what each airport was, and then we have the speeds for the cell phone carriers for Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, and T-Mobile. For this example, I am going to be comparing the speeds for Sprint and T-Mobile. Make sure that you are comparing the correct columns as it is listed out in the assignment. So the first thing you're asked to do is to find the mean speed for the two carriers. So we need to find the mean speed for Sprint and the mean speed for T-Mobile in this example. Similar to what we did in a previous section, all we're going to do is go to the stat key at the top and choose Summary Stats, then Columns. Here we're going to select the columns that we're interested in. So for this example, we're choosing Sprint and T-Mobile. I can select both at the same time by clicking and holding down the Control key on my keyboard, and that will select both at the same time. Then down here under Statistics, all we need right now is the mean. So I'm just going to click on the mean. You could select other statistics here if you wanted. Same way, you just hold the Control key down. We only need the mean for this one. And then we're going to click Compute. So here is the mean for Sprint and the mean for T-Mobile. So just at a glance here, it looks to me like T-Mobile has a faster speed because I see a much higher measurement for the T-Mobile data. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a 90% confidence interval for the mean difference between the two carriers. To do a confidence interval, we're going to go to Stat. Since we're talking about a mean here, and since we do not know the standard deviation from the whole population for either or any of the carriers, that means we're going to use the T distribution. So we go to T-Stat, and we're going to choose paired, because we do have paired data here. For each of the measurements, we have a paired measurement that came from the same airport. So we're going to choose paired. So all we need to do is select the two columns where the data was. So for the first column, I'm going to choose Sprint, and for the second column, I'm going to choose T-Mobile. Now down here under Perform, we want to do a confidence interval. So we're going to check this box that says confidence interval, and we wanted the level of the confidence interval to be 90%. So we want to make sure that says 90%, and then we can click Compute. So here is the confidence interval for that difference. So the lower limit of the confidence interval is negative 9.5, and the upper limit of the confidence interval is negative 5.0. So I can see here that 0 is not included in the confidence interval. So that means that when we subtract the Sprint numbers from the T-Mobile numbers, we do not expect that we will get 0 as a result. And that means that we do not expect that the Sprint numbers and the T-Mobile numbers will be the same. The only way we could subtract two numbers and get 0 is if those two numbers were the same thing to begin with. But here, our confidence interval is not including 0, so we actually don't think that subtracting will produce a 0. Therefore, we don't think that the measurements from Sprint and T-Mobile are the same. Furthermore, since both the lower limit and the upper limit are negative numbers, that means that we actually think that Sprint has a has a slower speed than T-Mobile. The only way I could subtract two numbers in this order and get a negative number is if the first number was a smaller number than the second number. So not only do we expect now that Sprint and T-Mobile are not the same, we actually have evidence that Sprint indeed is slower. So to help continue to confirm this, we're going to do a hypothesis test. So in the exact same way you did before, we're going to go to Stat and T-Stats again for the same reasoning, and to Paired again for the same reasoning. Again, we will select Sprint and T-Mobile. You will select the correct carriers for your assignment. And this time we do want to perform a hypothesis test. And we are hypothesizing here that Sprint is slower than T-Mobile. Remember, we just got that result from our confidence interval. We also had some evidence here that the Sprint speed was much smaller, much slower than the T-Mobile speed. So notice here that again the order that we're subtracting is the first population is Sprint, that's what I chose for sample 1, and the second population is T-Mobile, so we're doing Sprint minus T-Mobile. So if we subtract in that way, remember Sprint we think is the slower, smaller number, and T-Mobile is the higher number. If we subtract a smaller number, if we take a smaller number and we subtract a bigger number, then we expect to get something that is less than 0. So for the alternative hypothesis, we're going to change this to less than 0. And we can click Compute. So here are the results from the hypothesis test. So we can see here that we got this for our test statistic, and we got this for our p-value. So our p-value is very, very small. It's less even than 0.0001. So certainly it would be less than our alpha, whatever you selected alpha to be. Actually, for this assignment, we selected alpha to be 0.05. So this is certainly less than 0.05. Therefore, we should reject the null hypothesis. This is the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis says that the difference is 0. In other words, it means that the two carriers had the same speed, and therefore we have supported the alternative hypothesis, which says that the difference is negative, less than 0, which in real terms means that Sprint indeed is slower. That's it. That's all the technology you need to do in Statcrunch for your discussion board in week 6.